Okay, let's be real. Color pencils, top quality color pencils are quite expensive. So here's a couple of tips that I actually have learned to help me reduce wasting the colored pencil by having to sharpen it constantly sharpening it and breaking it. These are a couple tips that have helped me in the long run. That way I don't have to spend so much money on spending more on those colored pencils. So let's start out with the first one is keep like a dull pencil, keep a dull end when you are drawing the first few layers. I know I'm always talking about sharpening your pencils to make sure that you're like incorporating really good details, but really though, that is for the last few steps. When you're drawing small, yeah, you do kind of want to keep a little bit sharp, but for the first couple of layers, no matter whether it's big or small, keeping a duller pencil is actually going to help you in the long run to save on that pencil. So as you can see here, the first couple of layers, I'm doing more of a blending technique than creating the details just yet. So you can see on the left-hand side, I have the details, but after quite a few layers have been built up already. And then once you've got like a couple of layers, you can use a mineral spirit oil with a paintbrush to blend those couple of layers together, which also helps to save on using the color pencil nearly as often. I don't have a video of that at this second, but I have it in several of my other videos. So if you watched my videos before, and you've seen that paintbrush, that's exactly what I'm doing, and I point it out all the time too. So here's another really good example. Even in the black color pencil, I'm using a dull point to draw more of like the blended parts rather than the details. And then even this one here, this orange, it's not actually that sharp, even though it may look like it's sharp, but it's actually not. So you can see it kind of spreads out a little bit better too. So you get more surface, you cover more surface when you have a dull point. I know that's something that like a lot of people talk about is, okay, keep your pencil sharp because you really don't want to use a dull pencil and blah, blah, blah. But really though, the first couple of layers, you do want to have a dull pencil. It makes a lot of sense because you get more coverage too. The color pencil brand that I like to use for blending purposes is the Caran d'Ache Luminance, which is like a Swiss brand. It's really expensive, but it's very, very buttery smooth, and I love using it because of that. So I'm able to blend a lot of layers, and the color actually stays saturated for long periods of time after you've already drawn that portrait. There are some color pencils that the are not light fast. That's the word that they use. They're not as light fast, but the Caran d'Ache Luminance and the Faber-Castell Polychromos is another one that I really like to use that are very light fast. So I love using those. But this is a really great example as to what I mean by using a dull point. You're definitely saving a lot more on your pencil by just keeping it dull and not sharpening it over and over and over again. And you can see here that I have several layers built up already by doing that. Okay, here's a good example. Now you can start to see. I know I'm going to cut it short, but you'll see that paintbrush really does help to reserve more too. So the next one is light pressure. You want to use lighter pressure for the first few layers. Heck, even like the last couple layers. Still try to use lighter pressure. That way you can still build up the waxy coating over time, but not only does it help to show all of the colors that you've layered already, but it also helps to preserve that pencil even more so. So this is a really good example here. You can still see the tooth of the paper coming through, but I'm drawing lightly and a little bit more sporadically too, so I'm not necessarily drawing too much of the details just yet. So you want to hold off on drawing details until closer towards the end. That'll also help to reserve on that pencil. Here's another really good example as to what I'm trying to say about drawing light, especially for the first 5 to 10 layers. Once you get like the details down, usually I tend to, when I use heavier pressure, it's usually with like really, really dark colors like the black or dark sepia, where I'm trying to add a really nice contrast to the portrait. So it's not, the midtones and the highlighted areas, I'm not using nearly as much pressure. And you can tell, or at least I can tell, by the color pencils that I have in my drawers. So I can tell which ones I use the most, and they're always the darker ones, not the lighter or mid-tone ones. And that goes to show that I'm using heavier pressure to add that contrast in, but not nearly as much for like the first couple layers when you're just working on the undertones. So I'm just going to keep showing you this is a really great example as to what I'm trying to say here. So I'm about 3 layers in, and you can still see the tooth of the paper. And you can see that my pencils, I've had these for well over a year, and I draw almost all the time. So you can see that I'm still saving on these pencils. There's still quite a bit of that color pencil left. And as I build up those layers, now you can see like even some of the, I guess, some of the lighter ones, yes. But I've had those for a very long time, over a year, some of the lighter ones. I am using a little bit heavier pressure, but not too much, because the mineral spirit oil allows me to still keep a lighter pressure while incorporating that saturation in there. So I do have a sharper point for this because these are where I'm adding the details, but I have not used that pencil nearly as much, so I don't sharpen it until I've added the details. So that's another thing to remind yourself too. Is like, okay, don't sharpen it just yet. Work on those first couple of layers before going and sharpening, and then that when you start to add the details, then go ahead and sharpen it. That definitely helps to reserve on the pencil in the long run. Another one that some of you might like, some of you might not, is drawing smaller. So when you're drawing smaller, yeah, you can actually finish a portrait a lot faster than a bigger size. There's a lot of benefits to that, but there's also a lot of downsides about that too. So drawing smaller, you can complete a portrait a lot faster. You also save on your color pencils a lot better too, because you don't have to work with as much of a surface. And the more you have more complete portraits, the more satisfied you are, because of the complete project or the complete portrait. You can actually see your progress over time a little bit faster than if you were working on a big portrait, one big portrait at a time. It's a little bit more motivating too, because you've got um, you've already completed that portrait in a more reasonable amount of time than like months ahead of yourself. So that's just the best way I can explain it. But I do like drawing smaller because yeah, you can complete them faster. It also is really nice challenge to see, okay, how can I draw as much detail as possible in such a small size? So when I mean small, I'm talking about 4" by 4" size, not necessarily something that's really tiny, like 2 by 2" or something. But yeah, drawing small definitely has its challenges, and I think it's really good to learn how to draw small and then get bigger, only because it does help you work with proportions a little bit better than if you were drawing on a bigger size. So with color pencils, it takes longer than most art mediums, just because you have to build up so many layers and you cannot make very many mistakes. It's got very little room for error. So you have to be really careful, slow and methodical when it comes to this, and then also understanding the right kind of techniques and how to draw small. But overall, you do end up saving more on your color pencils because you don't necessarily have to use so much of it surface wise. Like the surface is a lot smaller, and then you don't have to, yeah, you kind of have to keep your pencils sharp, but not all that often. Like I said, the first couple of layers, you still don't necessarily have to have a super sharp pencil. So I try to still, if it's very dull, yes, I'll go and sharpen it a little bit, but I kind of have like a in between a lot of the time when it comes to small portraits. So something that's a little sharp but not too sharp. Um, a little on the dull side. That way I don't have to go and keep sharpening it. And also it's not going to mess up the details too much because if it's too flat, too dull, it creates a bigger surface. And with smaller portraits, it's a little bit harder to control where you're applying it if it is more dull. So it's really good to have it in between, and that's okay because you're drawing with lighter pressure already. You're drawing smaller, so you've got a smaller surface to work with, and then it's just a lot less maintenance, a lot less sharpening of the pencil, and a lot less use of it. Period. So ultimately, drawing smaller has its benefits, and that is definitely one of them, is it reserves more on your color pencils. I've also noticed that if you're drawing lighter fur, something that's white or gray or something like that, I don't have to use nearly much as many color pencils or as much pressure with the color pencils. So I do use a variety, but I don't have to apply nearly as many layers, which is really beneficial too. So if you can control what kind of subject matter you're using, draw lighter fur if you want to reserve on your pencils. But that is another great way. And if you're interested in learning to draw, I do have all sorts of different classes that are individual subject matter. So you can go and just take a class, whatever animal you want to learn to draw from, download the instructions, get like a really rough draft, little brief trace of the portrait so you can kind of see like a little outline of the raccoon here. I do a little outline first before I draw, and then follow the video. I explain in depth what kind of color pencils I'm using, why I'm using them, different techniques that you can use, and it's all in real time. So if you are interested, I have it linked below. You can also just go on my website, go to Learn to Draw. But if you want to take it a step further and you want to start to really learn how to draw pet portraits or just wildlife alone, I have a full 8-week program where you can learn to draw different types of fur, so different like lengths and different style, like curly, straight, different colored fur, and also different features on the animal, like the eyes, nose, mouth, ears. Those are all within those 8 weeks. And then the very last week, then you follow along a full pet portrait tutorial. The very last week, you draw your own pet portrait, and then I critique your work at the end, but you also get to ask me questions along the way. That's also linked down below, but it's also on my website if you go to Learn to Draw, and it's a 8-week program. Learn to Draw Your Own Pet program. So check that out if you're interested. And as always, please don't forget to like and subscribe and comment down below what kind of videos do you want to see from me. Do you like more of the tips and tricks? Do you want to see more long form content, like something that's not necessarily the full real-time tutorials, because those are hours long. You might not want to necessarily see the whole thing, but I could give you really good in-depth within an hour's time frame. So let me know in the comments below. And please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I will see you in the next one.